Cool.
It's working.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, I tend to have internet problems from time to time, so I really hope it will work for long enough at least. So yes, hi, my name is Eugenia, and I wanted to tell you a bit about the Joggle project that is called Global Free Webinars for Students that I led during 2020. Actually, the project right now is kind of finished, even though from time to time we still do things related to the project, but the official project, we kind of closed it. And I led it during 2020 in collaborations, of course, with Joggle, but also with Lectures Without Borders. So I have a PhD in virology. And last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, I realized that there was a huge need for science communication around topics related to this area of expertise that I have. And at the same time, I had been already working for a couple of years, so I had an interest and a bit of experience already in science communication. So I thought this pandemic, in a way, was also a way to combine my two passions. So when I learned that Joggle had these microgrants, I contacted Lectures Without Borders, which is this organization that I had already heard of, but I hadn't ever worked with or been involved in any way, to see if we could combine efforts to bring more knowledge about viruses to schools. It basically sparked from a personal point of view. Like I had in my own family people asking me questions about why don't we take antibiotics for COVID. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, it was true that a lot of people didn't even know what a virus was. So this was maybe what sparkled this idea of working. And then I decided to work with Lectures Without Borders because Lectures Without Borders is a really, really cool organization that I really encourage you to learn more about. It's a network of scientists and schools. Basically what they do, or what we do, because now I'm working with them, it's when scientists are traveling somewhere, for example, for a conference or for a collaboration or even on holidays, tell us where they're going. We find a school in their destination, and then we coordinate a lecture of these scientists in this school. And with them, we thought we could help students around the world become agents of communication. In a way, become active players in the fight against the spread of misinformation about the pandemic. So, because since the very beginning, there was a lot of misinformation going around, and we thought teaching is good, but engaging students and making them become agents that spread good information about the whole pandemic around themselves is the best way to actually, well, fight this spread of fake news. So our aim was basically to provide basic information that helped the students understand a bit better what was happening around them. And of course, then they could help others, their families, their friends, do the same. And that is when we started like doing these webinars, and we had a lot of schools that were interested. But of course, we ran into this huge problem. That is that many schools that had expressed interest in the webinars were simply unable to host them due to technical limitations. So with them, we co-created infographics in some cases to be shared through WhatsApp, podcasts that were done in radios. And this was the case that in all cases, we also tried to involve people from the communities that we were working with, and not just come as, you know, I'm the expert and I'm going to tell you what I know. But yeah, so we did a lot of different things, but still, I think there's a lot to be learned here. And this is what I would like to discuss today. Very briefly, since the project, and thanks to this project, so this is something that I really thank Joggle for. I actually started working with Lectures Without Borders pseudo full-time, not really, but I work a lot for them. So it's a non-profit organization, so we do work as volunteers, but we organize a lot of online events. One of them was a whole scientific conference that we opened for schools. So you can visit Lectures Without Borders website that is there if you want to know more. But today, actually, what I would like to discuss with you is how to address the challenges of virtual education. Will this be your new reality in general? Like, if so, if it is the new reality, how do we bridge this divide between those that have the technology to guarantee quality education in virtual settings and those that don't? And of course, how do we make education more universal and more inclusive? That's why in the what if question, there's this every learner would have access to quality virtual education. So I thank you very much for this very short presentation, and I'm very happy to discuss with you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to proceed.
So I could briefly talk about what we discussed in our breakout room. So we discussed a few sort of pros and cons of virtual education. I mean, sometimes we tend to focus a bit too much on the bad sides of it or the downsides of it. But I think interesting things that happened was, or that came up, were the first one, it was something that Eloisa mentioned of how her teachers at university were sometimes struggling to use certain tools, and then the kids, or well, the students are not kids anymore, but the students were the ones that had the knowledge. And I think one important point that happened thanks to this whole having to jump into virtual education was that suddenly the roles of teacher and student became a bit more blurred. And it kind of forces us to go a bit out of the traditional view of the teacher knowing everything and coming to bestow on the students their knowledge. The second point was also about this concept of what do we call education, or what do we call a class or a lesson. That so it also came from something that Eloisa mentioned of the idea of, we usually have lectures that could last 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of someone talking to us nonstop, and we are like passively listening to. And then suddenly virtual education kind of forced us to find more ways as teachers to engage the class, because suddenly they were in a place that maybe it was their home and they had their dog, they had their kids, they had something in the background that would be distracting. So we were fighting a bit more to engage people. And at the same time, I think this was actually a very, very positive thing, because so I can know from myself as a teacher that right now that I'm going back to teaching in person, I actually want to bring back to my classroom all those things, like ways to make things not be one directional but bi-directional, like having I'll allow kids or students in general, even if they're not kids, to be actively part of the lesson, and to understand that it's not just me who should be doing the talking. And I think that is a very interesting point about how to, I mean, what benefits could come from virtual education. So I think in a way we're all learning, and I do feel that from the beginning of our webinars a year and a half ago, or almost a year and a half to today, we did change a lot the way we were doing things. Like if you see the first webinars we did even in the project were all very just, it could easily be a YouTube video, in the sense that somebody was talking, nobody else was saying anything, and then there was a Q&A. And now everything is way more interactive. We're using way more ways for engaging the audience, asking them questions, doing polls, like doing things to really bring them back. But it's not just bringing them back, it's also getting from them real life feedback and experiences and knowledge ourselves, and learning ourselves as teachers from them. So I think that is extremely, I think overall it's also just a bit of a matter of time until virtual education could be really engaging and high quality for everyone. But of course it still remains something, and I think both Eloisa and me, being from Latin America, we both saw it happening in our own communities. We have personal experience of this, of people that we see this really cool virtual education happening, but a lot of people not knowing that it exists because they have no way to access it. So I think that still remains our biggest challenge.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I find that very interesting, the idea that virtual education is kind of rebalancing the responsibility in learning, and kind of veering more towards both teachers and students are learning at the same time through kind of this strange interface. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add, share?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I can share what we talked about in our group, because the first thing that came out to us is how to change the systems to actually really accommodate everyone. I don't know if we are both from Brazil, me and Eloisa, and I don't know if she told us in the other group that here in Brazil, for other levels of education, not higher education, because at higher education, we just are doing things from online, like in the internet, but for lower levels of education, people here, especially for the public education, people here are using TVs and radios. So to get to reach everyone. So I think these pandemic times brought us this idea that education does not have to be only at one room and only presential and only in one way. And we can actually diversify the ways that we can educate people. It's still not enough, but now we have different ways and different tools that we can use to actually get to people. Another thing that we actually talked about in our group is also how to motivate the students to be engaged and to not drop out of the class, because I'm a professor at the University of Brazil, and I felt that a lot of students were dropping out because of they were losing the motivations, they were having health issues, and even though our university offers a lot of programs to help students, they were still our dropout levels were still high. And Brian told us the same thing. He also, in another country, he also said that in our group that in his classes, a lot of students were not having access to the education online. So I think this is still a problem, how to get students to be motivated and how to really get them to we have a system that actually can accommodate everyone.
Yeah, it's so interesting how our media today is so consumable and so well crafted, and we can spend hours in front of our screens, but when it comes to learning and kind of this virtual education, we haven't yet cracked the code or given each other the resources to actually kind of create that same capturing of attention. Absolutely, yeah. Brian just left, but I've never encountered him before. It's nice that he joined today. There we go. Do we have anything else to add, or?
I just wanted to bring it up, what Eugenia said about the education. Like when we were ending the discussion in our group, that we should think about ways of changing the way classes are from this perspective of an old Greek way of someone in the middle of this place, like only one person talking out loud to a wider audience. And it's funny to think that this has been the same way since then, that things happen, and it's interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, I when I was looking at the question for myself as well, I was thinking, what if every learner had access to virtual education? Means that everyone has access to virtual tools as well, and that's not something that's easy. I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot of discussions around it, but it's not entirely feasible. And I just kind of wonder how you, like, I love that you thought about like those radio solutions and the infographics, because it's true that much more people have access to a phone today, and the phones are getting better, and that's a big thing. But then there's considerations at the intersection of sustainability as well, and I mean, it's bringing up a lot of things for me. That's really interesting. Brian, I see you're back. Did you have anything that you wanted to share? Where are you coming from?
Oh, thank you. I'm from Uganda, and I'm studying from Makerere University. I'm a student of medicine and surgery in my second year.
Wonderful.
Yeah, basically, okay. Basically, there's a lot to share, but regardless of the inadequacies associated with virtual learning in our setting right now, I believe there's a lot of things we can do to overcome, and I'm hopeful at some point we shall be there. We shall all be there, and we have access to virtual learning, as you say, as our theme. And yeah, I'm hopeful.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Actually, one extra thing I wanted to say before finishing. One thing that also came up in our group was an experience that we had at Lectures Without Borders, of how this digital divide is not only sometimes hindering the efforts of teaching, but also so there's this idea, and I think it's sort of pervasive, that the only people that are suffering, let's say, the problem of not being connected is the students. But sometimes the students that are not connected, or the country, let's say, let's bring it to more to like country-wise. There's countries with more connectivity, or more in general, more infrastructure in terms of technology and digital technologies, and countries with less. And there's always this idea, and it was sort of the case when we started doing these webinars, of those countries that we cannot reach as teachers to do these webinars. But then there's the opposite, and that is something that now that Brian was talking from Uganda, because we had a very good researcher that was from Uganda and in Uganda, and then we kind of discovered pretty late that he was an amazing speaker, because since he was in a place that was not very well connected, he could never actually join to our live events. So it's not only we can have a teacher that is based in a country that has a lot of technology and cannot reach a country that doesn't, but the opposite is also true. We have amazing research happening in places that, for whatever reason, are not very well connected or are not very well known. And then we have a lot of really nice experiences of schools in Europe that suddenly are learning that there's this amazing research being done in Ghana, and that they didn't know that this research happened there, because the institute doesn't have a website, or because the website is something that is, and I also mentioned that example in Argentina. I've been contacted to talk about viruses somewhere, and then I said that there's amazing virologists in Argentina. I can give you names, but you have to know them personally, because if you go to the website of the institute, it's a website that hasn't been updated in 10 years. So those people don't even appear in the website. And then how do you reach them if you don't know them personally? And I think the digital divide in ways is also causing this other thing, that there's people that could be amazing in teaching others, but they don't have the way of reaching to their potential students. So I think it's a bit of both sides that are losing from this divide.
Agreed. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm really pleased with everything that's coming back. We're going to leave it here today because we're basically at the hour. But yeah, thank you. Eugenia, I hope the project continues and go well, and we love to hear about it more. We'll be writing just a little article about it as well and posting it on the Joggle Medium to kind of to recap all these conversations and more about it. And there we go. If you're new to Joggle, to join the platform and the Slack, there's a big community of people that run great projects, just kind of like that, in various disciplines. And if you're a returning user, we'll thank you for being here and for being part of the community. So yeah, have a great day, morning, evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
There we go. Eloisa and Shrestha, I guess we have our meeting right now. Oh, and I can stop.